cut was Ed Henry getting the first White House final reaction, and they didn't even know about the Chris Lane murder case. And, of course, the president has injected himself into the case with the Cambridge police. They acted stupidly. If I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon, and all the other comments that he's made. So why the double standard here? Why hasn't the president spoken out about this? Joining us now, Daryl Parks, former Trayvon Martin family attorney, Horace Cooper, adjunct fellow with the National Center for Public Policy Research, co-chairman of Project 21 National Advisory Board, and welcome both of you back to the program.
Thanks for having me on. Thank you.
Horace, is there a double standard here? Does the president speak out only on some cases, not others? Do you think there's politics involved?
Well, of course there's politics involved, and of course it's a double standard. What's being operated on is the I know racism when I see it. I know bigotry when I see it. A man like Mr. Zimmerman, who uses his personal free time to tutor young black children and who rallied the community to investigate the assault on a black man, is still suspect because we know it when we see it. On the other hand, a person who writes, I actually hate these types of people, and I beat up a bunch of them with shots with my fist or some other kind of way where I knocked them down with one punch. Not any kind of example of discrimination or racism. Clearly a double standard.
Well, you know what? I had the honor of meeting at Daryl Parks, and you thought that it was right for the president to speak up in the case of the Trayvon Martin case. And do you think the president should speak out here? He's been utterly silent on it. The White House spokesman didn't know anything about it. Does that seem odd to you?
Well, I think clearly now the White House has issued a statement on this issue, and obviously the president will address it when he chooses to. However, I think that us trying to compare this situation to what happened to Trayvon Martin is totally out of whack for many reasons. Number one, remember, we are now 1 week into this situation, and we still have a lot to learn about the facts of what happened with James Edwards, Michael Jones, and Chancey Luna out there in Oklahoma. Until we learn more about what happened in the case, I think we all agree it's a very tragic situation.
Daryl, what do we have to learn here? That we know that one of the kids said that they were bored and they just wanted to kill this guy for fun.
Well, but, Sean, I think there are plenty of other facts associated around it that we all need to look into. For example, we now know that Michael Jones was charged with a lesser offense. We don't know the full statements from all of the witnesses. We don't have an investigation from the police department. So I think at a minimum, we should not be so quick to put politics into this equation when we know that this case is more involved.
Okay, let's remember the facts. The facts were an investigation was actually happening in Sanford, and it was called for the investigation to be short-circuited. We knew enough already that we insisted that an arrest take place and that shortly thereafter we go to a trial. We weren't interested in any kind of opportunity to hear what the investigation and the facts might show, and in fact the police chief was fired. The prosecutor who initially recommended against it was reassigned. All kinds of irregularities to push this case forward. In this particular case, without any outside influence, an arrest has actually already been made, and enough information has been brought forward that a grand jury will easily show whether or not this is a case that ought to go forward. The idea that the president needed to intervene in the one but be silent in the other shows that this is politics, and it also shows, as I said, I only know racism when I see it. It's a terrible type of legal standard to have because no one really can be sure when they're going to be called out or won't they.
Well, I think it's crazy to say that it's politics in this case when clearly you're trying to compare two different cases. You're talking about a case that's taken place a little over a week versus a case that existed for at least 26 days before the president addressed it. And there was a whole series of events that had taken place where the guy had not been arrested. And so trying to compare the problem in the Trayvon Martin case was the process that people were outraged with versus in this case where the police...
All right, let me give you another example.
The defendant.
Hang on a second. We all saw the beating on this bus. We have 3 15-year-old black kids beating up on a 13-year-old white kid, and the president chose not to say a word there. Now, that's happened weeks ago. So how do you respond to that, Daryl?
Well, I think you got to be careful here, Sean. I think we live in a big country that has many different things taking place every day. And I don't believe that just because a story makes the news that we are to require that our government officials should be speaking out. I think we all understand that we have a huge issue with violence in our country that we have to address.
But I'll tell you what the difference is.
How did these kids in Oklahoma get a gun, and where did the gun come from?
But there's a big issue here, because in the case of Trayvon Martin, and the jury saw that way, is you have a guy that was punched in the face, and you have an eyewitness that saw a ground and pound beating, and yet the president weighed in anyway. The president weighed in on the Cambridge police case, and meanwhile, the Cambridge police officer apparently didn't do anything wrong. That's why they had the beer summit. So here we have evidence on tape of what seems to be a racial crime, and now we've got also a World War II veteran, 88 years old, beaten up by a 16-year-old kid. It seems that the president's only weighing in on one side of this race issue.
No, I don't think the president is. I think you're taking it out of context. I think the president weighs in. If it becomes a big enough media issue, he's kind of pushed to do it. But I think the president's taking a very holistic approach of making us very aware that the violence in our country is an issue that we have to address. And so I think that, for example, with the kids in Oklahoma, must be a very serious issue going on with them that we all ought to be concerned about. That's what we ought to be trying to get to the bottom of versus pushing the president to respond to it. I think that we ought to be looking to the people in Oklahoma and say, hey, what is the story with these kids, and why did these kids do what they did, such a senseless act of violence by them? I mean, where was it? Why?
Wait a minute, but there's been a whole series of incidents, though. Horace, there's been, for example, Gainesville, Florida, white man beaten by a group of black men yelling, "This is for Trayvon." Same thing with Oak Park, Illinois. Toledo, Ohio, a 78-year-old guy was beaten by a group of kids shouting, "This is for Trayvon." Similarly in D.C. and Mobile, Alabama, Baltimore, Maryland, Chester County, Pennsylvania. There's not one. There's dozens of these cases out there.
Well, one observation. It's my turn now. It's my turn now. It's my turn. As one observation, one of the reasons why the president won't be standing up and speaking about these types of things is because there is an overwhelming difference in the number and frequency of times that white Americans are going around killing black Americans versus the opposite. The Department of Justice tracks this information, and you might not like it, you might not find it useful, you might find it, unpleasant to have the conversation, but it's a 400% likelihood that if there is a different race group involved in a murder, that it is likely to therefore be a black on white, not the other way around. But did the Department of Justice in this Oklahoma case, while we were busy investigating and letting this case go forward, did they send a grant down to Oklahoma City to pay for people to agitate in favor of an arrest or a further investigation? Because that's what they did in Sanford, even while we were attempting to get an investigation supposedly free from bias and influence. There is no way you can look at this and say, oh, the president has been neutral, the president has been fair, the president represents everybody on these issues. He has been very racially divisive, demonstrating that he favors one side over the other, and the president of the United States should never have that as his posture.
Daryl?
Well, I think we have to understand the uniqueness of the president, and I think that what hopefully all of America should get from what the president said, especially in that Friday when he went to the press room, was that the experience of African Americans in this country is very unique, and that some of the things that we experience, maybe there's others in our society who won't. I believe by him opening up to the country, he gave parts of America a chance to view and see what it's like to be of African-American descent in America. There's nothing wrong with that, because that's the experience that we have, and there are others who would never have that experience, and now you at least got a viewpoint that even from the person who's our president has had a similar experience in our country. And so for those who would say that the experience doesn't exist, you now know it exists.
But you said...
yes, sir.
Go ahead. Daryl, you said you didn't think, Daryl, that the Trayvon Martin case was racial. You said that.
No, I said that. And and I don't believe it was. Because, Sean, you have to remember, when you have a situation like Trayvon Martin, I think there was a racial undertone to it, but I don't think it was based simply on race. There were other issues that were involved that went to how George Zimmerman described Trayvon on that night. Obviously, the undertone was there. However, the problem in the case was the fact that when Don West was questioning Rachel Gentile, he tried to say that Trayvon injected race into the case. And part of what I was responding to the course of the case
wait a minute.
Hang
on. She did quote him as saying creepy-ass cracker. Isn't that racial?
Well, I think too, that you got to take in context the other things that she said in terms of what he said. And once you put it in context...
Yeah, but Daryl, you're not answering the question.
He used the N-word also to describe the man. So that nullifies the whole adjective that he used to describe the person.
That nullifies? So if anybody uses creepy-ass cracker along with the N-word, they kind of nullify each other? That's what you're saying? It's okay then?
I think so. I mean, it's rather obvious that he's using it very loosely, and there wasn't a real negative context
Daryl, I'm surprised to hear you say that. You don't think the term creepy-ass cracker is a racial term? You got to be kidding me.
But when you think about him saying it and him using the N-word also to describe the same person, Sean, then which one is he? Right?
Listen, I don't like either one of those terms. Period. End of sentence.
I don't either.
First of all, neither of the terms were appropriate to use, but what we just witnessed here is the exact problem. Again, it's like we're in Alice in Wonderland. You see the 9 of cards, I call it the 6 of cards. We vote on it, and it's the 6 of cards, even though it's the 9 of cards. There absolutely is no standard other than white man wrong, black man right. That is not a legal standard. That is not a standard that will unite our country. It's a standard that will divide our country. Overwhelmingly, the evidence was presented to the jury. They saw the information that they saw, and they reached a conclusion. In Oklahoma City, overwhelmingly, information is going to be presented to a jury, and they're going to reach a conclusion. But I repeat, if the president were to step out every single time there was a race-based incident, he would be overwhelmed with the number of instances where he was doing that, where blacks were the perpetrators. Now, no one's putting a gun to us and forcing us to engage in these kinds of terrible actions. We control that. It's the 50th anniversary of the MLK speech, and why can't we all get together on, we're going to shut down the use of the N-word, we're going to call out the rappers, and we're going to say the thug life has absolutely nothing to do with being black in America.
Well, I have to tell you, I think we agree on something. I think we all wish the best for our country. We all wish the best that we can try to help children who have issues like the kids in Oklahoma get past those issues. So hopefully we get to a point that we all try to find good in the situation, and we stop some folks from trying to attack our president, who I believe is doing an incredible job to help try and bring our country together and to help us appreciate the various perspectives that make up our great country.
Well, I agree with everything you said, except for what you said afterward, hopefully. This president has been terribly destructive to the economy, terribly destructive to black Americans in particular. We have lost so much ground under his administration that it was obvious that fewer black Americans were going to support him for re-election. And on Election Day, that turned out to be true. He is the first president in 75 years to be re-elected and got fewer black votes, both Republican or Democrat, than any other president. That says a lot about what black Americans are thinking about when they look at this individual. But the point is still broader. We have a responsibility as black Americans to embrace the opportunities that exist in this country and not play this racial division game called blacks win, whites lose. It is a destructive policy, it is divisive, and there can be no good outcome.
All right, guys, we got to leave it right there. Daryl, we're just out of time, Daryl. Appreciate you being with us. Also, Horace Cooper. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back toll-free. We'll